I get the privilege of introducing Henry Cho tonight. I first met Henry many, many years ago when he married my cousin, the former Amy Cavender from Arab, Alabama. If you don't know Henry, he's a well-known Christian comedian, and that's kind of a contradiction there because there are so few Christian comedians, but Henry's one of them. He's done a lot of work on sitcoms. He's appeared on The Tonight Show, The Late Late Show, several other TV shows. He's got a Comedy Central special, What's That Clicking Noise, that's showing now. I've seen that one. It's quite comical. Some of my favorite parts of your act, Henry, when you talk about your in-laws, since I know them. And Arab, Alabama, since I'm familiar with Arab, Alabama, too. Henry's also been in films, too. McHale's Navy with Tom Arnold and David Alan Grier. Say It Isn't So with Heather Graham and Sally Field and Material Girls with Hilary Duff and Angelica Houston, and that one was produced by Madonna. So he's quite busy. So it was great to have him here. If that's not enough, he's worked extensively with Vince Gill, Amy Grant, Willie Nelson, Carrie Underwood, and a host of other folks. So I'm used to seeing his comedy act, so I'm really looking forward to hearing you talk tonight, Henry.
Most people clap. It's all right. I'm kidding. So first off, right off the bat, I'm not a Christian comedian. I'm a comedian who's a Christian. There is a difference because Christian comedians aren't funny. And I mean that. They're funny in the right context, but I'm a mainstream comedian, and if you're sitting there wondering why is a comedian here speaking in our summer series, join the club. Steve sent me an email, said, hey, we got a summer series going on. Some mutual friends of ours threw my name in the hat somehow. And he said, what do you think? And, you know, my first inclination was just to delete it. I mean, he would have never known. But, you know, I try to do different things now. I try to be obedient. I try to get out of my norm when I can. I don't speak at a lot of churches. I do comedy shows at churches. I've probably done 4 this past year, past 18 months maybe, and they've been well received. But like I said, it's not Christian comedy. It's just comedy that's clean. I do teach class at my church, Harpeth Hills. We're a little, they're great. I mean, I'm a deacon there, which shows you somebody lost their mind one day. I got a call from one of the elders. He goes, hey, can I have coffee with you tomorrow? I need to talk to you about something. And I thought, oh, man, what have I done now? Because I was teaching a class for the singles, and I had on the board Tom Cruise, Britney Spears, Dave Chappelle, and a couple of elders walked by, and they saw it, and then I saw them come back, and they stood there for a long time. And so that's what I thought it was about. But, and to complete that, well, I'm not going to tell you what the class was about, but I teach out of the box. Anyway, so this elder, Tom Henderson, just said, hey, I said, what do I do? Am I in trouble for kind of some of my classes? He said, no, we want you to be a deacon. I'm like, well, okay, whatever. So I'm over men's and women's ministry and church life. Like I said, I don't do this. This is not what I do. The reason I'm here on this date is not because of subject matter. It wasn't the title. It's the date. I was available this date. And it just so happened, because I have friends driving by, you know, your marquee, and they're like texting me going, you're going to talk about forgiveness of sins? I go, yeah, that was the date. So that's why I'm here. I kept praying that something would come up, that I'd get a gig, or I'd have to travel, or one of my kids would get sick, and it just didn't happen. So I didn't really confirm this till like 2 weeks ago, because I kept praying that something would take me away. Because I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm not a preacher, as you can tell. I don't claim to be one. I don't claim to know any more about the Bible than anybody in here. I didn't grow up going to church. I can tell you that. I'm unchurched. I met Christ at Windy Gap Young Life Camp when I was 16 years old. And I followed a girl to Windy Gap. It's the only reason I was going. And before I left, my buddy goes, hey, you better take a Bible with you. I go, why? He goes, well, you're supposed to take a Bible. I go, I'm not taking a Bible. I'm going because Louise is going. And then God found me there. And it changed my life because I was a bad kid. But we had campaigners, which is a Bible study for new Christians in high school. And I'll never forget, my Young Life leader told us to look up, the first verse I ever looked up was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And I looked at him, he goes, "What's up?" And I go, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, "Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And I go, "Well, where's the 4? Because I don't know what you're talking about." He goes, "Really?" I go, I've never looked up a Bible verse in my life." He's like, "Wow, okay, we're going to back up." So he's one of my dearest friends. He's one of the greatest Christian guys I know. And he's the director of Young Life in Knoxville. And he and I stay in constant touch. And, he's my rock. So I'm unchurched. I married a girl, like Keith said, Amy Cavender from Arab, Alabama. If you know anything about Arab, you know she's white. Whitest town in America. Anyway, except the day we got married. I had Korean people there. They freaked out. So I got introduced into attending a Church of Christ through my wife. Because in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I was born and raised, by the way, I was born and raised in Knoxville, and I'm Korean for you people who are trying to figure that out. And in my act, I say that makes me South Korean. So my wife, we didn't have Church of Christ. I think there was one in Knoxville back then, and no one even knew where it was. And like I said, I didn't grow up going to church, so I knew nothing about it. So my wife was going to ease me into Church of Christ thinking. So she took me to Woodmont Hills. She asked me if I knew Marty Rowe. I said, yeah. I had long hair, had an earring. And so we went there, and my wife grew up in Arab, Alabama, going to a very small, conservative, very legalistic church. And Rubel Shelley was up there talking, and he did something that made her uncomfortable. So she looked at me and said, "We have to go." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, we need to leave. And I go, "I took a shower. We ain't going anywhere." And I go, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Well, they were saying something, and I don't really agree with that." And I go, What? Are you kidding me?" And we were dating at the time. So she and I had some big, long, drawn-out discussions about, she didn't know a whole lot about grace back then, and then we moved to L.A., and we went to Hermosa Beach Church of Christ, had 50 members. We were 10, 20% of the weekly offering. It was a small church, and most people there were unchurched. And so when you said Church of Christ in Southern California, there were no stigma, there was no misconception, there was no baggage, if you will, because I didn't know anything about it. People would go, "Oh, you Church of Christ." Well, you know what they say. No. Clue me in, what do they say? And then they'd say some of the things, and I'm like, I don't think so. I mean, maybe some people think that, but there's fundamentalists everywhere. So my wife and I began this journey together, and I think I've helped her a lot by having a really broad spectrum of what I think being a Christian is about, and about God's grace. And then she helped me about going to church on a regular basis and being there with her children. So I have 3 kids, and they're great kids, which is fortunate because we're not really good parents. Well, we're just not. God helps us there. When you have kids, people are stupid. They always ask us, like, if they sleep through the night, and I'm like, as far as we know. They're like, "Don't you hear him?" I go, "No, we turn the fan on." So I have 2 boys and a little girl, and I got to tell you, that little girl's rocked my world. Because now I got a little girl. It's changed my life. I had boys. Boys are kind of easier when they're little. They just kind of wake up and run around and break stuff. Got a little girl. I have to learn how to listen, have feelings, wear lipstick. I had sparkles on earlier today. But, so my wife and I are raising our kids here in Nashville. And we're here in Nashville because what I like to talk about is choices we make. And everybody has choices. You have choices in middle school, who your friends are going to be, who you're going to hang out with. You got choices in your job. Are you going to stay late after work? Or are you going to go home and be with your family? We all have choices. So my choices were a little more life-changing. It wasn't just a moment, because for my business, we should be living in California. But I was there for 5 years, single man, lived right on the beach. A little bit of my career background. I started out, and my friends are super famous. Adam Sandler, David Spade, Rob Schneider, Kevin James. Those are my pals. When they did Grown Ups, the first one, they got interviewed, and the lady goes, "So did you guys all hang out?" And Rob Schneider said, "Well, there's one guy missing." And Adam goes, "Henry was the only one with money back then, so we hung out with him all the time." And so those guys are my peers comedy-wise, and they're super famous. And that's okay that Henry chose not super famous, because that's a choice I made. And when Adam Sandler got married, he called me and goes, "Hey, I don't even know if this lady likes me for me or because I'm Adam Sandler." And I go, "Well, let's be honest, if you're a truck driver, you'd have never met her. But the fact that you make $25 million a year a movie kind of put you in her path. But she knows who you are, and that's all that matters." And he goes, "When you get in a plane and and you're flying commercial and you're in coach," I said, "I don't fly coach." But anyway, I'm kidding. When you're in coach or on Southwest and you're going to do a gig, I want you to know something. And I said, "What's that?" He said, "We all think you're the smartest one of all of us, because you're always different than us. And you made a choice." And I tell you, everybody asks me who the happiest guy I know, and I always say Henry Cho. Because they all went to New York to do Saturday Night Live. And Lorne Michaels asked me if I wanted to go. I wasn't a character guy. I kind of had my own television deal going on. So I stayed in L.A. And Los Angeles just made me someone I didn't like. I didn't like that guy. I didn't know who he was, really. We were in the height of the MTV era. There was an MTV party every night, just about. And us 5, 6 guys, we had that city wired. And it was a great time, if you look at it that way. But it wasn't for me. I couldn't do it. So I'll never forget, I was out with this young lady who was an aspiring actress, and she was very beautiful and just dumber than a bag of hammers. And I told myself, I got to go home. I got to find somebody who knows who Bear Bryant is. And I meant that kind of in general. And of course, my wife is an Alabama fan, so it really came home to play. But that was just a general thing. So I bought a farm in Gallatin in 1994, and I commuted every week for 2 years to L.A. I was hosting Friday Night Videos on NBC, so I was on the NBC lot for 2 years. Still had television deals going on. My last deal I had, Craig Ferguson was my executive producer, and the reason CBS would not put it on the air is because it was too wholesome. I'm sitting in a meeting with all the bigwigs, and they say, "This is really funny. This is awesome. This would have been great 20 years ago, but it's too wholesome. You got to make it edgier." And I said, "Like what?" And I said, "Let me tell you 3 things that aren't happening. No one's getting pregnant. It's not going to be a gay character in my show. I have a lot of gay friends. That just kind of happens in my business. A lot of them are great people, love them to death. I'll do anything for them, but there's not going to be one in my show. And we weren't going to get off color with drugs." So they said, "Well, if you're not going to do any of that, we really can't keep talking." So I said, "That's fine. We just won't do the show." And they stood there and go, "You really are not going to budge?" I said, "I'm not budging. Look, I've had 5 deals in 12 years, and I've said no because I'm not doing it." So I walked out in the parking lot, and I called my wife, and she said, "You walk away?" I said, "Yep." And to her, that's, instant retirement and all the things that go with it. So then about 3 years ago, we had a producer of a reality show came, and they wanted to do Cho Country and follow me around and kind of see how we went through our day. And, it'd been an educated duck dynasty. It's basically what it would have been. Duck Dynasty with some class and intelligence. I love those guys, but don't get me wrong, that's a bad show. Anyway, so they came to our house. They filmed us for 2-3 days. Amy had a hair and makeup girl running around for 3 days, which she thought was just the greatest. And they put together a reel. It's called a sizzle reel, something you show all the networks, about 8 minutes. And it was good. It's really good. And Amy and I were laying in bed one night, and she's like, are we really going to do this? And I said, well, we're not doing anything. I said, I've been praying about this so hard. I do not want this to get on the air if it's going to turn anything negative toward our family. And the only difference between my show, reality show, and all the other ones you see on television is, with my deal and my experience in Hollywood, I had what you call final edit. Nothing was going to go on the air that I didn't approve. So nothing was going to be taken out of context. Nothing was going to be switched around. No one's going to be confused of what was meant to be said or not. I had final edit, which they don't normally give, but I was going to do it otherwise. So I had control of the show if we wanted to go. And it kind of came down to a couple different networks wanted to do it. And Amy and I kept praying really hard. And I was praying that God's will be done, that if it did go, that we'd use it as a platform. And the more we got into it, and the more it got a possibility, my wife started praying that it did not happen. And it did not happen. And it was an easy thing not to pursue anymore. And then, year and a half ago, 2 years ago, with Duck Dynasty's big blow up, I get called again. And I just said, you know what, we're not doing that. My kids are older, my kids are funny, my kids are really funny. I wrote a little bit that Jackson, my oldest, and I did, and it was good. The thing was, he wanted to know why we have a mutt and all his friends have a pure breed. And I told him, a mutt is a better dog. It's smarter, it's faster, it gets all the best genes from its parents. It's way better than something full-blooded. And he goes, so I'm smarter than you. And my wife said, apparently. So we had moments like that in our show, but it's not for public consumption. It's just something the shows weren't going to do. So I get asked a lot, what am I doing now? And, I tell them, first off, he can stay here. That baby's not bothering me. I'm not a preacher. I'm a husband. I'm a father who does comedy. It's kind of what I do now. Television's horrible. American television's horrible. I get scripts sent to me a lot about being on television shows. There's a couple on right now they wanted me to be on, and the scripts are just awful. I can't even get past the third page before I call my manager and I go, did you read this? He goes, I knew you wouldn't do it. I mean, why are we wasting our time? He goes, well, I thought, maybe, you know the producers, it's going to be a really good show. I go, I can't do this. I can't do this now. I have children. I can't do it now. Now, one of the big regrets I have is one of the movies I did, Say It Isn't So. It's a Farrelly Brothers movie, Dumb and Dumber, Something About Mary. So Peter Farrelly calls me up and goes, hey, Henry, we're doing this movie, Say It Isn't So. Got a role for you. You want to do it? Sure. And my Jackson was just born. He's a little bitty kid. And so I was in Vancouver for 2 months. We're shooting a movie. Heather Graham's there, she's attractive a little bit. And Sally Field, all these great people. And I'm doing this movie, and my character was an ex-con, so he was really rough and had some language. And I'll never forget, we're at the premiere, and I'm sitting there with my wife and the big red carpet deal, and we're watching the movie, and my character comes out, and my wife lets go of my hand and looks at me and says, you can't do those roles anymore. And I go, that's not Henry Cho, that's a guy named Willie that I'm playing. And she said, when we have children, who do you think they're going to see? And I go, well, it's an R-rated movie, so by the time our kids see it, they'll think it's pretty cool I'm in a movie with Heather Graham. And she said, no, not at all. So I made another choice. It's not like Spielberg was calling me, asking me to do movies every week, but they're on the table. Films come down the pipe, I get scripts sent to me, and we just pulled back. Not doing anything that my kids can't watch, and I'm not doing anything that takes me away from my family for more than a week. Well, I haven't been doing a lot of movies. I can tell you that. I got asked to go to Australia for 6 weeks to do a movie. I just told them I can't do that. They're like, what are you talking about? I go, can't do it. They go, what kind of actor are you? I go, I'm a comedian and a dad and a husband. They go, what do you think the other actors do? They go away for that long? I go, yeah. And they're not great dads. So I'm making a choice here, and I run this by my boys especially, because they're going to have to make choices as they get older. And so, like I said, to take it off of my plate and onto yours, we all have choices we make every day. A buddy of mine was upset because he missed his daughter's birthday and he blamed it on the plane being delayed instead of him staying at this conference an extra day to play golf. So he calls me from the airport because he's trying to get one of my famous buddies to send a jet for him, like that's going to happen. And I go, what do you need? He goes, I need to get home. I go, where are you? He said, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I go, well, he goes, the plane's delayed, mechanical. I go, what did you miss? He goes, I'm missing my daughter's birthday. I go, well, why were you still there? Well, we had this golf thing yesterday, and my boss was there, and I really needed to play with him. And I said, yeah, I can't help you, man. Can't help you. Can't you call one of your friends, or can we? No, not going to help you. You made a poor choice. Poor choice. So when you guys are in your office, and you're staying late, and you shouldn't be, or if you're at home and you ought to be visiting your grandkids and you just don't want to take that drive, or if you have grandkids and you ought to be visiting your parents, but you just don't want to drive or go over there because it's the same old, same old, same old, you better wake up because you're making a poor choice. You know, my in-laws live down in Arab. It's 2 hours and 14 minutes away. And that's driving as slow as I can. And we are there constantly. Constantly. And there's nothing to do in that town. There's not. Unless you smoke. Then you'd be okay. But we're there all the time. Because my kids need to see their grandmother. Now, my mom's in Knoxville, which is 2 hours and 40 minutes away. And we don't go there that much. And that's on me. It's not on my wife. That's on me. It used to be on my wife, but I've grown up now. Because instead of getting in the car and heading south, we need to head east. And the thing about going to Knoxville is all my buddies are there and there's stuff to do. And my kids love it there too. But they don't have cousins like they do in Arab. If you don't know where Arab is, it's southeast of Huntsville. It's up on a mountain. You just keep driving till you can't get your radio on. You're there. And it's choices we make, and I have to make better choices for my mother. And raising my children doing what I do is one of the hardest things. That's why the choices I make, I always consider them, because I know it's not easy. I mean, a lot of you people in this room have no idea who I am, and that's great. I don't care, they don't care, no one cares. But a lot of people do, and we'll be in restaurants and people come up and they're really nice about it and they want to say, hey, like your work, or will you sign this or whatever, and it's great. That's fine. That's part of it. It's what I do. But my children start to feel that. This one gentleman I was eating lunch with my daughter, and this one gentleman came up and stood at our table, and he was there a little too long. Okay? He should have gone, but he stayed there because I was being very courteous. And finally, my wife said, "Sir, can you leave? This is my time with my dad." And he looked at me and went, "I am so sorry." And I said, "You should be." And he looked at me and goes, "Wow. Have a nice day." And my daughter looked at me and goes, "Am I in trouble for saying that?" I said, "No, honey. No, that's Daddy's fault. I should have cut him off a long time ago. I just thought he would get the clue and leave." But he did. So now that Jackson knows I'm a comedian, it's backfiring because he tries to be funny. In 5th grade, they learned about Native Americans, and the teacher let them pick their own names. So she asked one boy, "What's your name?" He said, "I'm Running Deer." Asked another boy, "What's your name?" He said, "I'm Roaring Bear." Asked Jackson, said, "What's your name?" He said, "I'm Chick-fil-A." So then we had a parent-teacher conference. True story. Teacher pulls us in, looks at me and goes, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "I think that's hilarious." She's like, "Don't you have any concerns?" I go, "Yeah, did he time it right?" My wife's looking at me going, "Really? You know, this is his teacher all year." It's funny. If he didn't time it right, it's not worth doing. So we got home, and Jackson's like, "Hey, Dad, am I in trouble?" I said, "No, man, it's hilarious. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody, and it's funny, go for it." He said, "You do stuff like that?" I said, "Of course, man. I did jokes all through school." I said, "Buddy, I was a bad kid. I was that kid that I tell you not to hang out with." So my kids are growing up with this. But if you ask my kids about me, I hope they'll tell you that I'm a dad that does comedy. Kindergarten, Tate had to write what her dad did, and she said, "My dad tells jokes and plays golf." And what's your mom do? My mom eats lunch with her friends. Yeah, my wife loved that. So that brings us here. That's why we're here in Nashville. The last project I did was for GAC, Great American Country, because it's based here in Nashville. It has almost zero viewership, $0, and my agents and managers are going, "Why are we working with this network?" And I'll go, "Because they're based here. And it's 12 minutes from my house. And my kids do not have to move. They do not have to go to another school. And number one reason, we're not living in LA. So everything I do professionally, I try to stay here. But I always tell my kids, just because we're staying here, Brentwood, Franklin, the bubble, we get out of it a lot. A lot. Last 2 spring breaks, I took my family to Honduras. Jóvenes en Caminos, an orphanage there that our church started years and years ago when it took 36 hours to get to Tegucigalpa. Now we fly down, hit the ground running, stay at a Marriott, get a breakfast bar. It's not the same. But that's where my kids go on spring break, and that's where they want to go. So I tell them all the time, you're living in one of the wealthiest counties in the country, and we can't turn a blind eye to downtown. You are going to go to church on Monday when we have inner city. You are going to take some kids around at VBS who do not go here, because if you get stuck here and you don't ever do anything else, it's a really bad choice. You know, I used to think, okay, I'm going to bank all this money, and my wife and I used to talk about this. Bank all this money, we'll have a house in Hawaii, we'll have a house in Aspen, and one in Arab. That was her choice. We'd have a house somewhere in the South. And then you start thinking, why? Why? You know, when I was young and single, I had sports cars, I had Harleys, I had nice trucks, I had everything. You know, my son loves cars. He's a boy. They all do. They want to know, why don't I get a Lamborghini? I go, well, number one, you'd have to eat beanie weenies for a year. Number two, we don't need a Lamborghini. I drive a 2001 Tundra. And I get asked a lot, you know, why you drive that old truck? I could drive a new truck real easily. But I could also spend that money and do something better. So that's what we're trying to do. That's a choice we're making. Now, don't get me wrong. We live way above people ought to live. We have a little lake shack down on Tim's Ford, and our first boat was a 91 Sea Ray. My wife did not even like getting in it, but we got in it. And I'll never get the first time I'm pumping gas at the marina. Kid comes down to help me, he looks at me and goes, "You're Henry Cho, right?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I don't know how to say this." I go, "Just say it." He goes, "I thought you'd have a nicer boat." And Amy goes, "See?" And I said, "That's not the point." I said, "The point is that that guy would think I would have a nicer boat." And I said, "No, we're going to have this thing that gets us around for 5 years," because my kids are going, "Are we going to get a bigger boat?" And I always ask them. I ask my kids this all the time. "You naming me boats I had growing up?" And they all, in unison, "Zero." Exactly. So the choices we make to stay here in Nashville, it's an easy choice. Quality of life, great friends, we've got a great church. We're really plugged in. We love what we do. Our kids love their schools. They love their friends. It's all good. But I'm telling you right now, don't just sit in this hammock. You get comfortable here, something's going to happen. It's going to blow you away. It's going to blow you away. Now, some of you probably came here thinking, well, you know, Henry's going to come up here and talk about forgiveness of sins. Well, I don't think we'd all even waste our time coming here on a Wednesday or a Sunday if we weren't forgiven of our sins. If that was not part of the deal, churches would not exist. Why would you come here? If you didn't know that that was part of the deal, when you choose Jesus to be your personal Lord and Savior, and you believe that He is the Son of God and that He raised up from the dead, even if you believed all that and you weren't forgiven of your sins, we'd be wasting our time. I could pull out 20 verses. I Googled it just to see how many would pop up. Forgiveness of sins. And bam, they're all in here. They're all in this Bible. That's the promise. But we're forgiven of our sins, but that doesn't mean you just go out and do whatever you want either. There's not a checkbox. You can't sit there and go, okay, I went to church Sunday, went to class, Wednesday night, I visited some old person, and I tithed 8%. You can't check your box. There's only one way you're going, and that's Jesus. The only way you're going is Jesus. If Jesus will wash everything away for you. Now, there is something you're supposed to do after you accept Christ. And that's to become a disciple and expand His kingdom. That's not a choice. You don't get to zip in, zip out, don't do anything, never help, don't lift a finger, come and listen, do your thing, sing a couple songs, take communion, walk out. That's not the deal. You're supposed to expand His kingdom. And that's further away than like Grassland. You have to expand His kingdom. Widows, orphans, You ever think about that? You're going to get to heaven? How far back in the line you're going to be? Behind all those widows and orphans? Our preacher said something. Chris Smith, if you know him, great. If you don't bother. I'm kidding. Chris is great. Because a lot of young married couples and older married couples have been married a long time, are coming up to him saying they just want to be happy and how they just weren't happy. And I'll never forget, he said, hey, God does not want you to be happy. He doesn't care if you're happy. He wants you to be faithful. And if you're faithful, you'll be happy. So if you're a Christian, if you've accepted Christ, hey, sins are forgiven. You got no worries there. If you're not doing anything, if you're not a disciple, I'd start to worry a little bit. It's not a choice. It's the way it is. My mother-in-law goes to Arab Church of Christ. My mother-in-law, 10 years ago, would not listen to a word I read out of this because it's not the King James. 15. I've been married 15 years. 15 years ago. I'd read something to her and she goes, what version is that? It's NIV. Well, but her eyes have opened. Now I can read her verses out of this, and she listens. Because she's learned that it's about grace. It's not about showing up here. It's not about how many showers you give, baby showers. It's not how many birthday parties. It's not any of that. It's not about any of that Church of Christ stuff. Now, a lot of people bag on Church of Christ. You know what? A cappella singing? Love it. Love it. That was something my wife had to go, hey, we don't have instruments. And I'm like, I don't care. It's beautiful. Oh, you're okay, because you know why we don't have instruments? And I go, well, you want the biblical thing or the historical thing? Historical thing is, all the churches got burned in the South. They didn't have an instrument. So from Civil War on, till they got a little money, it's all a cappella. Doesn't matter. I guarantee you, none of that matters. And and if you believe it, God love you. That's great. But I really don't think any of the little nitpicky things matter. I had to learn a lot about attending a Church of Christ. I am not a member of the church, which I've been asked and told I am. I am a Christian who believes in Jesus, and I fail 95% of the day trying to expand His kingdom, but that's what I'm trying to do. We try to do it in all we say and do. It doesn't always work, but we're trying. One of our elders at my church, John Bornstein, I was telling him, we're really struggling with how we spend our money. And he said, at least you're struggling. Because a lot of people don't even think about it. And we're not doing everything perfect, believe me. Believe me, I drive an old truck, but I play brand new Pro VXs. Okay? If I hit a Pro V in the water, I'm pulling out another brand new one. I belong to the most exclusive golf club in the Nashville area. I've been there 17 years. So I'm not cutting everything. It's called baby steps. And the golf club is staying, as long as I can keep it. But there are things like that. We're doing what we can. We got out of private schools because I couldn't stand anybody there. Bottom line. I'm standing there with all these people going, I do not like any of y'all. We got to get out of here. And we're very blessed. Williamson County, greatest schools ever. I get asked that all the time from all my buddies up there that play music. Your kids are in public school? Yeah, you know what? That's where I went and that's where you went. It's okay. So I asked Jackson, who's 13 now, Brentwood Middle School. I said, all right, you tell me. All your buddies are at MBA, CPA, BA, what do you think? He said, I don't want to go anywhere. I love my friends here. I don't want to go to any other school. I want to go to Brentwood High. And I went, you just bought yourself a car. Not a nice car, but a car. Expand his kingdom. I have no right to be up here. The only reason I got asked to come here because I talk in front of people. Before I teach a class at Harpeth Hills, that's the first thing I tell them. I'm not going to win a Bible Bowl. Ever. My 7-year-old comes home with stuff I've never even heard of. Great stories. So I go back and read them now. The only reason I'm here is because I'm a Christian and because I can talk in front of people. And so some people were asking me, am I going to use what I do as a platform to spread God's Word? And I say, no, I'm not. I really don't think God wants me doing church shows. I mean, 1 or 2, 5, 8 a year, yeah. But I'm a mainstream guy. I'm the guy who goes to Zanies and they got to put up a sign that says clean comedy series, special engagement, because it separates me from all the filth that's out there. I was in Seattle 3 weeks ago. And the manager there said, I could not believe I sat there and laughed for an hour and you did not do anything offensive or cuss one time. I've always heard about you. I didn't believe it was possible. I think that's where God needs me. Because you don't need me to come here next year in your summer series. I take that as agreement. Trust me, I don't know what I'm doing here either. I really don't. Our youth pastor, youth minister, Jason Pagel, if you don't know him, you're missing out. Drove by, texted me, Barry's Chapel? Yep. Why? Should have deleted it. But I did. So that's all I want you all to think about. Don't worry about being forgiven your sins. If you accepted Christ, you're going to be forgiven. That's part of it. Get baptized, forgiven, washed away, you're a new person. But you got to become a disciple. Think about that. I want you to think about how many people, maybe I haven't led anyone to Christ personally, but have I at least planted a seed? One seed? Just one. And if you haven't, you better get on it. One of the greatest verses, one of the scariest verses I hear in this book is in Matthew. People are in heaven, and then there's a separation. Sheep and the goats. A lot of people get to that spot going, made it. You want me to go over there? You don't want that. Don't sit on your hands. Don't talk about people. Be a disciple. That's all I got. Anybody else coming up? Usually I walk off to applause.
If we can do anything to help you, anybody here tonight, if we could pray for you, or if you are ready to be baptized into Christ, we'd love to help you with that at any time, not just tonight, but any time. But let's stand and sing.